The file on his desk said everything. Jennifer Walsh, 28, interior designer, hired for a 6-month contract redesigning Mercer Enterprises headquarters. Caleb had spent the last 7 years building an empire while his heart remained frozen. She thought his silence was cruelty. She had no idea his distance was the only shield protecting her from the wreckage of his past. But 3 weeks in, his defenses were crumbling, and falling for her wasn't an option he could afford. "Hey, my beautiful people. I'm really glad you made it here today. Whatever your day looked like, busy, stressful, or maybe even a little heavy, just take this moment for yourself. You're safe here. You can slow down, breathe, and just be. If you're new to this space, welcome. Truly. You're not just a viewer, you're part of this family now. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and drop a comment. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Now take a deep breath, get comfortable, maybe grab something warm to drink, and let yourself settle in. Let's step into today's story together. Caleb Mercer hadn't smiled at anyone in 7 years. Not genuinely. Not the kind of smile that reached your eyes and meant something real. There were corporate smiles, thin, controlled, calculated to close deals and intimidate competitors. But the kind of smile that suggested actual happiness, actual warmth, actual connection, that had died the day his fiancée walked out of his penthouse and into the arms of his business partner. That was 7 years ago. Jennifer Walsh had no idea any of this when she walked into his office on a Monday morning carrying fabric swatches and mood boards, ready to transform the sterile, cold headquarters into something that actually felt human. She had no idea that the man behind the imposing desk, with his sharp jawline and darker-than-midnight eyes, was a study in emotional reconstruction gone wrong. She just knew that he'd hired her. His assistant Diana had been warm and encouraging, and this was the biggest opportunity of her career. She also knew, approximately 45 minutes into her first day, that Caleb Mercer hated her, or at least that's what she thought. "The color palette you've suggested is too warm," he said, not bothering to look up from his computer. His voice was like gravel, rough, cold, absolutely unforgiving. "This is a corporate space. It should reflect professionalism and authority, not comfort." Jennifer blinked, looking down at the soft golds and warm creams she'd carefully selected, colors that studies showed increased productivity and created welcoming professional environments, colors that made spaces feel human instead of like cold monuments to capitalism. "Actually," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady, "research shows that warm, inviting corporate spaces increase employee satisfaction by 40%. People do better work when they feel valued and safe. Your employees aren't robots, Mr. Mercer. They're humans who spend 8 hours a day in this building. Shouldn't it feel like a place where they actually want to be?" That's when he looked at her. His eyes were so dark they were almost black, and in them, she saw something that looked like pain quickly shuddered away. He held her gaze for maybe 3 seconds, long enough for her to feel it like a physical touch, and then he looked back at his computer. "Fine," he said flatly. "Do whatever you want." And that, apparently, was the extent of their conversation for the entire project. Over the next 2 weeks, Jennifer learned the rhythm of Caleb Mercer's indifference. She'd arrive in the morning with sketches and ideas. She'd request meetings to discuss progress. He'd send Diana in his place. She'd try to engage him in the hallway. He'd acknowledge her with the barest nod before disappearing into his office. She'd attempt to show him renderings of the finished designs. He'd give them a cursory glance and find something to criticize. The lighting was wrong. The furniture layout didn't optimize workflow. The artwork on the walls was too feminine. Everything was too something, too warm, too soft, too human. "He's not usually like this," Diana said one afternoon, appearing next to Jennifer's workspace on the 38th floor with 2 cappuccinos and an apologetic expression. Diana was in her 50s, with kind eyes and the air of someone who'd been managing chaos for a long time. "I mean, he's always serious, but the cold thing? That's new." Jennifer accepted the cappuccino, grateful for the kindness. "New how?" "Like, new in the last 7 years." Diana sat down in one of the design chairs, crossing her legs. Before that, Caleb was different. Harder to work for, sure, but not like this. There was something underneath it all. Then his fiancée left him, married his business partner, actually, and something in him just locked down. It's like his heart had a door, and after that he sealed it shut and threw away the key. Jennifer processed this information while looking at the cappuccino in her hands. A fiancé, a betrayal. A business partner betrayal. That was a lot. That sounds painful, she said carefully. Oh, it was catastrophic, Diana said matter-of-factly. He restructured the entire company overnight, bought out his ex-partner's shares, and basically started from scratch. 7 years of putting everything into work and nothing into anything else. I've never seen him go on a date, never seen him laugh at something that wasn't a quarterly earnings report. It's actually kind of sad if you think about it. Jennifer wasn't supposed to think about it. She was supposed to be a professional who designed beautiful spaces and didn't worry about the emotional state of the emotionally unavailable CEO who'd hired her. But something about what Diana had said stuck with her. The image of a man who'd locked his heart away so completely that he'd forgotten how to access it. By week 3, she started bringing him coffee. It started as a practical decision. She was going to get herself coffee anyway, so why not grab him one? Black, no sugar, because she'd observed that was how he took it. The first morning, she left it on his desk while he was in a meeting, slipping away before he could see her. The second morning, she did the same. By the third morning, she decided to actually hand it to him, to give him the option of acknowledging her presence. He took it without looking at her, said nothing, and closed his office door. "You're wasting your energy," Marcus, her lead designer, said gently. Marcus was young, talented, and infinitely patient with her increasingly obvious fixation on the man who treated her like a particularly annoying furniture arrangement. "He's made it clear he doesn't want to be bothered." "He's hurting," Jennifer said, which was probably more honest than she meant to be. "Yeah, well, that's his problem, not yours. Come on, let's focus on the 4th floor lounge. The lighting specifications are giving me a migraine." But the next morning, she brought him coffee anyway. By week 4, Caleb had stopped protesting. He still didn't thank her, still didn't smile, still didn't acknowledge her existence beyond accepting the coffee with the barest movement of his hand. But he didn't refuse it anymore. And once, she caught him actually drinking it, sitting at his desk late in the evening when he thought no one was looking, his expression something between grateful and devastated. That's when Jennifer realized something crucial. Caleb Mercer wasn't indifferent to her. He was terrified of her. She didn't understand why yet, but she would. Jennifer had been at Mercer Enterprises for exactly 1 month when she realized Caleb Mercer was actively trying to avoid her. Not passively ignoring her like before, but strategically orchestrating his schedule to ensure they wouldn't cross paths. If she was on the 38th floor reviewing design layouts with her team, he'd suddenly have an urgent meeting on the 15th floor. If she happened to arrive at the main office at 8 in the morning, he'd already be there and disappearing up the private elevator by 7:45. If she tried to catch him in the lobby between meetings, he'd take a different exit. He was playing chess with her proximity, and she was starting to suspect he was losing as badly as she was. The problem was, she was losing too. "You're staring again," Marcus said, not even looking up from his laptop where he was updating the floor plan renderings. They were in the temporary design studio on the 35th floor, surrounded by fabric samples in warm creams and golds, color palettes that ranged from terracotta to deep sage, and architectural blueprints that represented Jennifer's professional dreams. The space smelled like fresh coffee and possibility, but right now it felt like a prison of her own making. And it's becoming less subtle by the day. "I'm not staring," Jennifer protested weakly, pulling her eyes away from the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. She'd positioned her workspace specifically to catch glimpses of Caleb when he moved through the executive floors visible from this angle, which was pathetic, which she knew. "I'm observing. There's a difference." "It's the same stare, Jennifer. The one that says I'm thinking about why the emotionally unavailable CEO is actively avoiding me like I'm contagious." Marcus finally looked up, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose with the expression of someone who'd watched his colleague develop an unhealthy obsession and was beyond tired of witnessing it. He wasn't wrong, which was irritating in the extreme. Jennifer had always prided herself on being professional, on keeping her personal feelings separate from her work. She was a designer. Her job was to create spaces, to understand color and light and form, not to wonder about the emotional state of the man who'd hired her. Not to catch herself listening for his voice in meetings she wasn't even attending. Not to spend her evenings researching his company's history and discovering articles about his broken engagement 7 years ago, reading between the lines of corporate speak to find the human story underneath. But something about Caleb Mercer had gotten under her skin in a way that felt almost physical. It was like he'd become a puzzle she couldn't stop trying to solve, a locked box she was obsessed with opening, and the more he avoided her, the more determined she became. "I just think he's interesting," she said, which was the most honest thing she could say without admitting that she'd started noticing things like the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was stressed during video calls she could see from across the building, or how his entire face transformed when something genuinely amused him, though those moments were rare enough to be almost mythical, glimpses of a man that almost no one else got to see, or how his shoulders carried tension like it was a physical weight that grew heavier each day. "Interesting doesn't mean your business," Marcus said more gently, his tone shifting from teasing to genuinely concerned. "The guy is clearly dealing with some stuff. Diana mentioned something to me about his past. Apparently his ex-fiancée left him for his business partner, which is about as brutal as it gets. Let him deal with it on his own time." "How did you—" Diana feels bad for him. She's been working for him for years and has watched him basically become a corporate robot. She talks about it sometimes, says he used to be different before the whole fiancé disaster. Marcus turned back to his laptop, but not before Jennifer caught the sympathetic look in his eyes. "The point is, the guy has built walls the size of skyscrapers around his heart. You can't break through that by bringing him coffee." But Jennifer wasn't good at letting things go, and the image of a man who'd locked his heart away so completely that he'd forgotten how to access it stuck with her like a burr she couldn't dislodge. The breakthrough came on a Friday evening, completely by accident and entirely on his terms. She'd stayed late, way too late actually, it was almost 9 o'clock, to finalize the master bedroom suite designs. Caleb had sent a note through Diana requesting a subtle revision to the executive lounge area, which was apparently his private retreat space where he spent his time when he needed to escape the corporate machinery. Jennifer had taken it as a personal challenge to create something that would make even his cold, frozen heart appreciate the space. If she was being honest with herself, which she tried to avoid, she was designing the space for him, imagining what it would feel like to create a sanctuary for someone who'd clearly forgotten what rest and peace felt like. She was so focused on updating the renderings, adjusting lighting specs and tweaking furniture placement for optimal comfort that she didn't notice when she heard the elevator ding with a soft chime. Didn't realize when quiet footsteps moved through the darkened office space until a voice made her jump violently in her chair, her coffee nearly spilling across her keyboard. "You're still here!" Jennifer's heart nearly exploded out of her chest. Caleb stood in the doorway of the design studio, still wearing his work clothes, charcoal suit jacket, white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking like he'd been running his hands through his hair all day, which he probably had, given the disheveled state of it. His dark eyes swept over her workspace, taking in the 3-monitor setup, the accumulated coffee cups from the last several hours, the designs she'd been obsessing over with the kind of focus that bordered on manic. "I could say the same about you," she said, trying to slow her racing pulse and sound casual, like her whole body hadn't just gone into overdrive at his presence. "It's almost 9 o'clock. Don't you have a penthouse to go brood in?" "I was working on the quarterly reports." He didn't move from the doorway, maintaining that physical distance he'd perfected over the last month. That invisible line he never crossed, like getting close to her physically might be contagious. "You should go home." "You should go home," she countered, which was probably bold given their power dynamic, but she was tired of pretending she didn't notice how hard he was working. She'd heard through Diana that he'd been in the office until midnight most nights this week. "You look like you haven't slept in days." "I sleep fine." "You look like you sleep the way other people have nightmares, efficiently, and with a lot of regret." She stood up from her chair, trying to bridge some of the distance between them, though she stayed on her side of the workspace. "Seriously, Caleb, you're going to burn yourself out." For a moment she thought she saw something flicker across his face, something that might have been amusement, or might have been the ghost of actual human emotion, breaking through his carefully maintained facade. But it passed so quickly she couldn't be sure, like she'd imagined it. "The executive lounge," he said, changing the subject with the finality of a closing door. His voice had taken on that cold, professional tone she'd come to recognize as his defensive mechanism. "Show me what you did." Jennifer hesitated, then pulled up the renderings on her main monitor. She'd designed the space to be a sanctuary, warm wooden tones that suggested both strength and comfort, deep jewel-toned accent walls in navy and forest green, furniture that was expensive but not sterile, artwork that had actual emotional resonance instead of just filling space, a leather wing-back chair positioned by the windows where someone could sit with a drink and think, soft lighting that could be dimmed for mood or brightened for functionality, bookshelves lining one wall, a space where someone could actually breathe, a space where someone who'd forgotten how to feel might possibly remember. Caleb moved closer to the monitor, close enough that she caught his scent, something expensive and masculine and completely unfair to her nervous system, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He studied the designs in silence for what felt like an eternity, his expression unreadable, his jaw tight. Then he said something that made her breath catch, made her heart do a strange, fluttering thing in her chest. "It's perfect." She looked at him, surprised by the genuine appreciation in his voice. Yeah. He was still looking at the screen, not at her, which somehow made it easier for her to study his face. The sharp jaw, the tired eyes, the way he carried tension in his shoulders like it was a physical weight he'd grown accustomed to. It looks like a place where someone could actually rest, where they could actually let go. There was something in his voice that suggested he wasn't just talking about the space, something that suggested he knew what it felt like to never let go, to carry everything yourself, to build walls so high and thick that eventually you forgot what was on the other side, to lock yourself away so completely that connecting with another human being felt like the most dangerous thing imaginable. "Caleb," she started, not even sure what she was going to say. Maybe offer comfort, maybe ask him to let her in, maybe tell him that she was starting to understand him in ways that scared her. "We need to talk about the project timeline," he interrupted, building the wall back up brick by brick with visible effort. "Diana mentioned you wanted to discuss the lobby redesign. The main floor entrance needs work. Schedule a meeting with her. I'll make time to review the concepts." And just like that, he was turning away, moving back toward the elevator with the same efficient distance he maintained during the day. Like their moment of connection had never happened, like he was already retreating back into the safety of his controlled, isolated world. "Wait," she said, surprising herself. He paused but didn't turn around. "Why do you do this? The cold shoulder, the distance, the way you've been avoiding me? Why?" For a long moment he stood silhouetted against the office lights, and she thought he might actually answer. She thought maybe, finally, he'd let her see behind the carefully constructed walls. She held her breath, waiting, hoping. "Because it's easier," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm, so full of resignation that it broke something in her chest. "Because getting close to people means they can hurt you, and I've learned that lesson enough times." Then he was gone, the elevator doors closing behind him with a soft whisper of finality. Jennifer stood alone in the design studio, her heart still racing, his words echoing in her mind. Getting close to people means they can hurt you. He'd just told her exactly what she needed to know. The coldness wasn't about her. It was about him, about a man who'd learned to protect himself by not letting anyone close enough to matter, who'd decided, sometime in the last 7 years, that the risk of love was simply too high. The question was, what was she going to do about it? The next Monday morning, she arrived with his coffee as always. Dark roast, no sugar, exactly how she'd learned he liked it. But this time, she also had a plan forming. If Caleb Mercer had built walls because he was afraid of being hurt, then maybe she needed to show him that not everyone would betray him. Not everyone would walk away. Not everyone was his ex-fiancée. She didn't know yet that his past was about to come roaring back in a way that would test everything. The email arrived at 2 p.m. Jennifer was reviewing carpet samples with her team, debating between 2 shades of gray, when Diana appeared at her workspace with an expression that suggested she'd just swallowed something bitter and toxic. "You need to know something," Diana said quietly, closing the office door behind her and lowering her voice so no one else could hear. Victoria called, Caleb's ex-fiancée. She's back in the city, and she's already started making moves. "What kind of moves?" Jennifer asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew exactly what was coming. The kind that involve her new company bidding against Caleb's for a major client contract. The kind that involves her being very vocal in industry circles about how Caleb's company is losing its edge and that he's distracted by cosmetic interior changes instead of focusing on core business growth. Diana's jaw clenched with fury. She started a campaign to undermine him, and she's specifically targeting you, saying that hiring a relatively unknown designer for a massive rebranding project is proof that his judgment is failing, that he's lost touch with what really matters. Jennifer felt her stomach drop. Is she right? Am I inexperienced for this? No, Diana said firmly, her eyes fierce with loyalty. You're actually perfect for this project. Your vision for the space is transforming how people think about this company. But Victoria doesn't care about the truth. She cares about destabilizing Caleb. She wants him off balance. She wants to remind him that people leave, that people betray, that trusting anyone is stupid. How did you? Because I've known Victoria for years, and I've watched what she does to people. She's brilliant and ruthless, and she learned everything she knows from Caleb before she destroyed him with it. And now she's using those same tactics against him. Diana moved closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. And if she finds out that he's starting to feel something for you, Jennifer, she's going to use you as a weapon against him. She's going to poison his mind against you. The implications of that hung between them like poison gas. By the end of the week, the first article appeared in a business journal. Mercer Enterprises loses focus. Is CEO Caleb Mercer's distraction costing him the game? The piece mentioned the massive interior redesign, questioned whether it was a good use of corporate resources in a competitive market, and made subtle insinuations about Caleb's judgment being clouded by something other than business strategy. By Monday, there were 3 more articles from different publications. By Wednesday, 2 major clients Caleb had been courting sent emails saying they were reconsidering their options because they were concerned about the company's strategic direction and needed to work with leadership they could fully trust. And Caleb went absolutely cold. It wasn't the distant cold of before. It was a frozen wasteland of rage and pain and the kind of betrayal that comes from having history repeat itself. He barely acknowledged Jennifer in the hallways, his jaw tight, his eyes harder than stone. He sent Diana to all the design meetings without explanation. When Jennifer tried to catch him to discuss the negative press and assure him that the redesign was actually strengthening the company's brand perception, he walked past her like she was invisible, like she'd never existed at all. By Friday, as she watched him disappear into his office and lock the door behind him, she understood what had happened. Victoria hadn't just attacked the project. She'd made him believe that Jennifer was part of the problem, that his feelings, whatever they were, had made him vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation he'd been protecting himself against. She'd used Jennifer against him, just like Diana said she would. And now, once again, a woman had proven herself to be a threat to his carefully guarded heart. The silence was deafening. For 9 days, Caleb didn't speak to Jennifer. Not in passing, not through email, not even through Diana with carefully crafted professional messages. He'd simply erased her from his world with the same efficient brutality he applied to everything else in his life. It was like she'd become toxic by association, like her presence was now a liability instead of an asset. Jennifer threw herself into work with manic intensity, redesigning the entire 4th floor from scratch, pushing herself and her team to the brink of exhaustion, because staying busy meant not thinking about the way his eyes had looked when he'd walked past her in the lobby on Tuesday, like she'd betrayed him personally. The irony wasn't lost on her. He was doing exactly what she'd been afraid he would do, shutting down, building walls, deciding that trusting her was too risky. Victoria's sabotage had worked perfectly. She'd planted seeds of doubt, and Caleb had watered them with his own fear and old wounds. But the following Monday, Jennifer had had enough. She waited until she saw his car pull into the underground parking garage, then headed down herself. She caught him as he was getting into the elevator, pressing her hand against the closing doors before they could seal her out again. "Don't," he said flatly, not even turning to look at her. "Whatever you're going to say, don't." "I'm going to anyway," she said, stepping into the elevator beside him. It was a small space, intimate in a way that made her heart race. "You need to listen to me." "I don't need to do anything." His voice was ice. "The articles are right. Your presence here is a distraction. I've lost 2 major clients because of the perception that I'm losing focus. The board is questioning my judgment. So here's what's going to happen. Diana is reassigning you to remote work for the remainder of your contract. You'll submit designs, we'll review them with minimal contact, and when this project is finished, we part ways. The words hit like physical blows. Remote work meant no more seeing him, no more chances, no more possibility of breaking through. It meant he'd won. It meant she'd failed. "That's not fair," she said, her voice shaking with anger and something that felt dangerously close to tears. "You're letting one woman's lies dictate your entire life. Again, she beat you 7 years ago, and she's beating you again because you're too scared to even consider that maybe, just maybe, someone could care about you without an ulterior motive." The elevator doors opened on the 38th floor. Caleb stepped out and Jennifer followed him, refusing to let this be the end. "Stop," he said, not turning around. "No." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Look at me. Actually look at me and tell me that you don't feel anything. Tell me that those moments we had didn't mean something to you. Tell me that when you told me about Victoria, about being afraid of getting hurt, that you were just making conversation." His jaw clenched. She could see him warring with himself, see the moment when he decided that cruelty was his best defense. "You're right," he said coldly, pulling his arm away from her touch. "I was lonely. You're beautiful and kind, and you bring me coffee every morning like I'm worth caring about. Of course I responded to that. But that's not the same as trust. That's not the same as actually believing you're different from everyone else who's left me." "I haven't left you," she whispered. "Yet," he said, and the word was a weapon. "But you will. They always do. So I'm going to save us both the trouble and end this now before it gets worse." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into his office and closing the door with absolute finality. Jennifer stood in the hallway, trembling, her hands shaking. She wanted to scream, wanted to kick down his door and force him to see that she wasn't giving up. But she also understood in that moment that Caleb had spent 7 years building this particular wall, and she couldn't demolish it with anger or logic or even love. She needed something else. She needed to show him, not tell him. The strategy came to her that night as she sat in her apartment surrounded by design work she couldn't focus on. If Caleb didn't trust words, if he decided that caring about someone was just another trap set to destroy him, then she needed to show him through actions. She needed to prove, beyond any doubt, that she wasn't Victoria, that she wasn't using him, that she was willing to fight for him even when he was being absolutely impossible. She started the next morning by going directly to the source. Victoria Ashford's office was on the 42nd floor of a glass building downtown. She was younger than Jennifer expected, maybe 35, with sharp features and sharper eyes, wearing designer clothes like armor. She looked at Jennifer like she was something mildly amusing that had wandered into her office uninvited. "Jennifer Walsh," Victoria said, leaning back in her chair with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've heard so much about you. Caleb's little interior design project. How's that working out? Heard he's distancing himself from you." "Smart man. Taking out the trash before it ruins his reputation further." Jennifer sat down without being invited to, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I know what you're doing." "Of course you do. Everyone knows what I'm doing. That's the point." Victoria studied her nails like the conversation was beneath her. "I'm reminding Caleb that trusting people is stupid, that trying to connect with others just makes you vulnerable, that isolation is the only safe choice." "Why?" Jennifer asked, and she meant it genuinely. "Why would you want him to suffer like that?" "Because he hurt me." For a moment, Victoria's mask slipped, and Jennifer saw something raw underneath. 7 years ago, I loved him, and he made me feel like loving him was weakness, made me feel like my ambition was selfish, that I should prioritize us over my career. So I chose him, and he chose to feel betrayed when I decided I wanted more. He decided that love was dangerous and locked himself away. And now, I'm just making sure he stays locked away because a man who can't love isn't going to hurt anyone else the way he hurt me. It was tragic in a way. Both of them trapped in their own versions of the same prison. "He's not the same person who hurt you," Jennifer said carefully. "He spent 7 years trying to be better, and you're trying to destroy that progress because you're still angry." "He destroyed me first," Victoria said coldly. Then you're even, Jennifer said. So you can stop now. Victoria didn't stop, but she also didn't escalate, which Jennifer took as a small victory. The articles continued, but they became less frequent. The client pressure remained, but Caleb was managing it, despite his emotional shutdown. And through it all, Jennifer remained. She continued coming to work. She continued leaving his coffee on his desk. She submitted brilliant designs through remote work, designs that transformed Mercer Enterprises into something that reflected both power and humanity. She let him ignore her and keep his distance, but she didn't disappear. Then, on a Friday evening, 3 weeks after he'd told her they were done, she received an email from Caleb himself. Not from Diana. From him. Come to the executive lounge at 8 p.m. We need to discuss the final designs. Her heart thundered in her chest. She knew he was home because she'd seen him enter the private elevator. She knew this was a trap or a test or some version of both. She also knew she had to go. The executive lounge was exactly as she'd designed it. Warm woods, jewel tones, soft lighting that created an atmosphere of peace and sophistication. And Caleb was sitting in the leather wingback chair she'd specified, holding a tumbler of what looked like expensive bourbon, looking at her with an expression so complex that she couldn't parse all the layers. "It's a beautiful space," he said quietly. "I spend an hour here every evening just being." "Good," she said, not moving from the doorway. "That was the point." "I've been an asshole," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I let my fear drive me away from the one person who actually might not leave. I let Victoria win by doing exactly what she wanted, isolating myself, convincing myself that no one could be trusted." "Yes," Jennifer said. "You have been an asshole." "But I'm done," he continued, standing up and moving toward her. "I'm done letting the past determine my future. I'm done being afraid that caring about you makes me weak. Because the truth is, Jennifer, pushing you away has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And pretending I don't feel anything has been destroying me from the inside out." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the determination underneath it. "I know I've given you every reason to walk away," he said, "but I'm asking you not to." Jennifer's heart was racing, her breath coming short. "What are you asking exactly?" "I'm asking you to take a chance on me, to let me prove that I can be better than my fear, to let me love you without running away." She reached out and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. His eyes closed at the contact like it was the first time anyone had ever touched him with care. "You're going to mess up," she said softly. "You're going to get scared and pull away and make me want to throttle you." "Probably," he admitted. "And I'm going to stay anyway," she continued, "because I didn't fall for the CEO or the empire or the penthouse. I fell for the man underneath, the one who tried to protect me by being cold, the one who's terrified of being hurt but brave enough to try anyway." He kissed her then, and it was different from the desperate embrace she'd imagined. It was slow and thorough, and full of gratitude and relief, and the kind of vulnerability that only comes from finally letting someone in. When they broke apart, his forehead was against hers and his hands were gripping her like she might disappear. "I love you," he whispered. "God help me, I love you." "Then stop running," she said. "Stop hiding. Stay." "I'm staying," he promised. The first week of being together was terrifying. Not because of Victoria, though she'd gone suspiciously quiet, which meant she was planning something, Jennifer was certain. Terrifying because Jennifer was hyper-aware of every moment, every touch, every word that passed between them. Because Caleb was trying so hard to be better, to be present, to not retreat into the safety of his walls, and the effort of it showed in every interaction. She could see him fighting his instincts, see him consciously choosing vulnerability over protection. They'd spent the evening after the executive lounge confessions at his penthouse, talking until 3 a.m. about everything they'd never discussed before. His broken engagement, her failed relationships, his fear that loving someone would only result in betrayal, her determination to prove him wrong. He'd traced patterns on her hand while she talked, and she'd watched his face transform as he let himself actually listen, actually feel, actually believe that maybe she wasn't going to destroy him. But belief and reality were two different things. The first time he really kissed her, not the tentative kiss in the lounge, but a real kiss, was in his office on a Tuesday afternoon when they were supposed to be reviewing the final design renderings for the main lobby. She was standing at his desk, pointing out the lighting modifications, and he'd simply pulled her down onto his lap and kissed her like he was starving. "What was that for?" she'd asked, breathless, when he finally let her up for air. "Because you're here," he'd said simply. "And I can't believe you're actually here." There was something desperate in that statement, something that told her he still couldn't quite believe she wouldn't leave. So she kissed him again, trying to put into the gesture what she couldn't say with words. "I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. You're worth the risk." By Friday, they'd fallen into a careful routine. He'd arrive at her workspace in the morning with coffee from the cafe downstairs, something different each day, his way of asking her to stay, of showing her he was thinking about her. She'd update him on design progress. They'd steal kisses in the stairwell between floors, and at night they'd return to his penthouse, where the distance between them was measured in inches instead of the vast chasm that had separated them for the past month. "Tell me something," she said one evening, lying in his bed, her head on his chest while his fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. The penthouse was dark except for the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating shadows and illumination that made everything feel dreamlike. "Tell me about before, about who you were before Victoria." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his chest rising and falling beneath her head. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, and she waited, knowing he needed time to gather the pieces of his past into something he could articulate. "I was happy," he said finally, his voice rough with something between nostalgia and grief. "Not perfect. I was ambitious and probably too focused on work. But I believed in connection. I believed that love was worth the risk. And then she left me for someone who could give her more, someone more successful, more established. And I decided that being open like that was weakness." "It's not weakness," Jennifer whispered, pressing a kiss to his chest over his heart. "It's bravery." "It feels like weakness when you're the one getting destroyed," he said. "But you already know that, don't you? Diana told me about your last relationship, the guy who cheated on you." Jennifer nodded against his chest, remembering the sting of that betrayal, though it felt distant now compared to the fear she'd felt when Caleb was pushing her away. "He said I cared too much, that I was suffocating him. Made me feel like my love was a burden instead of a gift." "He was an idiot," Caleb said definitively, and there was something fierce in his voice that made her lift her head to look at him. In the shadows, his face was all sharp angles and intensity. "Your love isn't a burden. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me, even though I spent 3 weeks being too much of a coward to admit it." She kissed him then, slow and deep, and he rolled her onto her back, his weight settling over her with a care that suggested he was afraid of breaking her. His hands traced the curve of her waist, her hips, his lips finding the sensitive hollow beneath her collarbone. She arched into him, her fingers gripping his shoulders, and felt the exact moment his control started to slip. "Tell me if you want to stop," he whispered against her skin, his voice rough with desire. "Don't stop," she breathed, and he didn't. What happened between them was slow and deliberate, his hands and mouth mapping her body like he was learning her, committing her to memory. He was careful with her, almost reverently so, taking his time building her pleasure until she was gasping his name. When he finally moved inside her, it was with his forehead pressed against hers, his dark eyes locked on her face like he needed to see her, needed to know that she was really there, really choosing him. "I love you," he said as he moved, and she could feel the truth of it in every touch, every breath, every emotion raw and exposed on his face. "God, Jennifer, I love you so much." "I love you too," she said. And she meant it with a depth that terrified her, this feeling that was both fragile and unbreakable simultaneously. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Jennifer felt something shift inside her chest. This was real, not the fantasy she'd been building in her head while he was ignoring her, but something genuine and complicated and worth fighting for. Monday morning brought a problem. Jennifer arrived at the office to find Caleb looking more stressed than she'd seen him in weeks. His jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid beneath his dress shirt, and there was a tension radiating from him that set every nerve on edge. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, moving into his office and closing the door behind her. "Victoria sent a cease and desist letter this morning," he said flatly. "She's claiming that I'm interfering with her business operations, that I've been making threats against her and her company. It's completely fabricated, but she's made it very public. The board is panicking." Jennifer felt her stomach drop. This was escalation. This was Victoria playing her final card, trying to destroy him through legal threats instead of just media manipulation. "What kind of threats is she claiming you made?" Jennifer asked carefully. "The kind that don't exist," Caleb said, and there was something broken in his voice. "But that's not the point. The point is that she's managed to make it believable enough that my board is asking questions about my judgment, and our major clients are getting nervous. She's trying to force me to step down, to prove that she was right all along, that I've lost touch with reality, that I'm unstable." "That's not going to work," Jennifer said firmly, "because you have me and I'm going to help you prove that you're not what she's painting you as." "How?" he asked, and the despair in his voice broke her heart. "How are you going to fix this, Jennifer? She's poisoned every well." "By showing them who you really are," Jennifer said. She moved around his desk and pulled him up from his chair, forcing him to look at her. "We're going to do a full presentation of the redesign. You're going to walk them through what we've built, what we've created together. You're going to show them that this isn't distraction or loss of focus. This is you remembering what matters. That success isn't just about quarterly earnings. It's about building something that people actually want to work in. That you're not broken, you're evolved." "That's not going to work against a legal threat," he said, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Or at least the possibility of hope. "Maybe not," she admitted. "But it might be enough to show your board that you're not the unstable man Victoria is claiming you are. And it might be enough to remind you that you're not the man you were afraid you'd become." They spent the next week preparing for what would essentially be a trial by board. Jennifer coordinated with her entire team to put together a comprehensive presentation of the redesign, showcasing every floor, every design decision, every element that tied into Caleb's vision for transforming the company culture. She worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and determination and the knowledge that this mattered, not just for Caleb's career, but for proving to him that he was worth fighting for. Caleb stayed late with her every night, his hand on the small of her back as they moved through the office, reviewing materials, tweaking presentations. But she could see the toll it was taking on him. The stress, the fear that Victoria was going to win, the old wounds opening up again as he questioned whether he'd been stupid to try. "We're going to get through this," she said firmly one evening, finding him staring out the window at the city lights. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her cheek against his back. "And when we do, Victoria is going to realize that she didn't destroy you. She only made you stronger." "What if I'm not strong enough?" he asked quietly. "What if I fail again?" "Then you'll fail," Jennifer said simply. "And you'll get up. And you'll try again. That's what brave people do." He turned in her arms and kissed her, deep and desperate, and she felt the exact moment his fear started to transform into determination. "Okay," he said against her mouth. "Let's do this." The presentation was scheduled for Thursday. 24 hours before they walked into the boardroom, Caleb found Jennifer in their, because it was theirs now, this space they'd built together. Private office. "I have something for you," he said, and she could see the nervousness in his expression. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Jennifer's breath caught. "I'm not good with timing, and this is terrible timing given everything happening, but I need you to know something. I need you to know that no matter what happens tomorrow, you're my future, not the company, not my reputation, you." He opened the box to reveal a simple diamond solitaire in white gold, elegant and timeless and absolutely beautiful. "Caleb, we've only been together for 2 weeks, she said, though her heart was racing. "Exactly," he said. 2 weeks of knowing that you didn't leave when things got hard. 2 weeks of you proving that you're different. 2 weeks of me falling deeper in love with you every single day. I don't need a timeline to know that I want to spend my life with you. So ask me if we're moving too fast. Ask me if I'm sure, but don't ask me to wait." Jennifer was crying, happy tears that blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes. The answer is yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and she marveled at how it caught the light, sparkled like a promise. "Tomorrow we show them who we are," he said. "Tomorrow we fight." The boardroom was silent except for the soft hum of the projector and the beating of Jennifer's heart, which felt loud enough to fill the entire space. 14 board members sat around the long mahogany table, their faces arranged in expressions ranging from skeptical to outright hostile. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, perfectly composed in a tailored gray suit, her expression one of polite interest that barely concealed her satisfaction. She'd already won, her presence suggested. They just hadn't figured it out yet. Jennifer stood to the left of the presentation screen, her hand steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Caleb stood at the head of the table, looking every inch the commanding CEO despite the tension she could see in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. He was fighting for his career and his reputation, but more than that, he was fighting for the version of himself that was still learning to believe in connection. "Thank you all for making time for this presentation," Caleb began, his voice steady and controlled. "I know that recent events have raised questions about my judgment and the direction of this company. I'm here to address those concerns directly." He nodded to Jennifer, and she clicked to the first slide, a photograph of the original headquarters, stark and cold and distinctly unwelcoming. The board members exchanged glances. They knew what that space looked like. "6 months ago, I decided to undertake a complete redesign of our corporate headquarters," Caleb continued. "At the time, I framed it as a cosmetic update, a modernization of our physical space. But the truth is, I was doing something far more significant. I was attempting to remember who I used to be before fear convinced me that connection was weakness." The next slide appeared. The transformed lobby, warm and inviting, modern but human in its design. Jennifer watched as several board members leaned forward, genuinely surprised by what they were seeing. "Our company is built on relationships," Caleb said. "We work with clients who want to feel valued. We employ people who deserve to work in spaces that reflect their worth. And yet, for 7 years, we've operated from a place of isolation and control instead of collaboration and trust. I let my personal trauma dictate our corporate culture, and in doing so, I was limiting our potential." Jennifer had to stop herself from gasping. This was vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected, Caleb laying bare his emotional wounds in front of people who'd been trained to exploit weakness. But he wasn't flinching. He was continuing. "Jennifer Walsh was brought in to redesign our physical space," he said, and Jennifer felt every eye in the room turn toward her. "But what she actually did was redesign my approach to leadership. She showed me that strength isn't about building walls, it's about building connection." The presentation progressed through each floor, each space transformed by Jennifer's vision. The employee lounges where people actually wanted to take breaks, the collaborative workspaces that encouraged innovation, the executive areas that balanced power with accessibility, the subtle design elements that made people feel valued and seen. Our quarterly metrics show a 12% increase in employee satisfaction, an 8% improvement in retention rates, and a 16% increase in client acquisition since these changes began, Caleb said, moving to the financial slide. These aren't cosmetic improvements. They're evidence that investing in human-centered design directly impacts our bottom line. He turned to face the board directly, and Jennifer saw the moment his expression shifted from professional to absolutely genuine. "3 weeks ago, someone tried to convince you that my personal life was interfering with my professional judgment," he said, his eyes briefly meeting Victoria's before returning to the board. "They were right that I've been personally involved in this redesign, but they were wrong about what that means. My engagement with this project hasn't distracted me from my responsibilities. It's reminded me what my responsibilities actually are, not just to quarterly earnings, but to creating a company that reflects our values and our vision for the future." There was a long pause. Jennifer could practically feel the board members calculating, weighing, deciding whether to believe him. Then, Margaret Chen, the longest-serving board member, began to clap. Slowly, the others joined in, and Jennifer felt something loosen in her chest. It wasn't over. Victoria's legal threats were still real, the damage still present. But they had this. They had this moment. The confrontation came later, in the hallway outside the boardroom as people were filing out. Victoria caught Caleb's arm, pulling him away from the crowd with a grip that suggested she was barely maintaining her composure. "That was quite the performance," she said coldly, her voice low enough that only Caleb and Jennifer could hear. Jennifer had followed, unwilling to leave his side. It wasn't a performance, Caleb said calmly. It was the truth. The truth, Victoria laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the marble walls. You really believe that? You really think that hiring some designer to fix your office space has fixed you? You're still the same man who didn't know how to love me? You're just better at pretending now. No, Caleb said, and there was something final in his voice. I've accepted that I couldn't love you the way you needed me to. And I'm sorry for that, Victoria, genuinely. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being punished for it. Watch me, Victoria said, and her eyes were ice. This isn't over, Caleb. That legal threat is just the beginning. Actually, it's over, Jennifer said, stepping forward. She'd worked on this all week, had done her research, had prepared for this exact moment. Because I did some digging into your cease and desist letter, and I found something very interesting. The claims you're making are provably false. Caleb never made threats against you or your company. I have emails proving that, and I have witnesses who can corroborate every single interaction, which means your legal threat is baseless. Victoria's face flushed with fury. You little bitch. And if you continue to make false claims against Caleb or this company, we're prepared to pursue defamation charges, Jennifer continued, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. My lawyer has been copied on all of this. You wanted to destroy him because he wouldn't love you the way you wanted to be loved. But that's not his responsibility, and it's not going to work anymore. Caleb pulled Jennifer close, his hand settling at the small of her back in a gesture that was both protective and supportive. Victoria looked between them, and for the first time Jennifer saw something break in her expression. The realization that she'd lost, that her pain wasn't going to destroy the man she'd once loved. You think this is a victory, Victoria said quietly, but you're going to learn what he's really like when he gets bored with you, when you realize that his idea of love is just another form of control. Maybe, Jennifer said simply, but that's my choice to make, and my choice is to stay. Victoria walked away, and Jennifer felt Caleb exhale against her hair. The celebration was quiet, just the two of them in Caleb's penthouse as the sun set over the city. They'd ordered champagne and takeout, were sprawled on his couch in the living room that had become as much hers as his over the past few weeks. You were incredible today, Caleb said, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. She was wearing one of his dress shirts, nothing underneath, and he couldn't seem to stop touching her. The way you stood up to Victoria, the legal research you did, you fought for me. I fought for us, she corrected, turning to face him. There's a difference. Is there? He asked, and his dark eyes were serious. Because it feels like the same thing to me. She kissed him then, slow and deep, tasting champagne and relief, and the particular sweetness of victory earned through vulnerability instead of cruelty. His hands moved to her thighs, pulling her closer, and she let herself sink into the sensation of him. The warmth of his body against hers, the way his hands trembled slightly as they skimmed over her skin, the soft groans he made when she kissed the sensitive hollow beneath his jaw. I want you, he whispered, his forehead pressed against hers. I want you right now, and I want you tomorrow, and I want you 50 years from now. I want to wake up next to you and remember every morning that I chose to be brave enough to love you. Jennifer's breath caught at the intensity in his voice, at the raw honesty of his emotion. She pulled back just enough to look at him, to see the man he'd become, someone who'd learned that strength and vulnerability weren't mutually exclusive. Then take me, she said simply. He did, with a tenderness that took her breath away. He moved her to his bedroom, laid her out on the soft sheets like she was something precious, something worth protecting and cherishing. His mouth traced paths across her skin, her collarbone, her breasts, the sensitive inside of her wrists. His hands mapped her body with reverence, finding places that made her gasp and arch toward him. When he finally moved inside her, it was slow and deliberate, his eyes locked on hers like he needed to see her, needed to know that she was really there, really choosing him. He whispered things against her skin, promises and affirmations and declarations of love that she felt in every cell of her body. I love you, he said as he moved, his voice rough with emotion. I love you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for not letting me be afraid anymore. I love you too, she gasped, and she meant it with a depth that terrified and exhilarated her simultaneously. They moved together until there was no separation between them, until they were one entity of pleasure and connection and absolute trust. When he came, it was with her name on his lips, his entire body shaking with the release of not just physical tension, but emotional release, 7 years of fear and pain and isolation pouring out of him into the safety of her arms. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Jennifer felt something settle in her chest. This was real, not the fantasy she'd built while he was ignoring her, not the desperate need to prove herself to him. This was genuine partnership, built on the foundation of choosing each other despite, or perhaps because of, their respective traumas. "There's one more thing," Caleb said, his voice drowsy and content. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and in the soft light from the city outside the windows, she could see the peace on his face. "I want you to move in, officially. Not just staying over constantly, but actually move your things in. Make this place ours." "Are you sure?" Jennifer asked. "We're still technically moving fast." "I've spent 7 years moving slow," he interrupted. "And all it did was waste time I could have spent with you. So yes, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, sealing the promise. Whatever came next, whether it was smooth sailing or more obstacles, they would face it together. And that was all she'd ever needed. 3 months into living together, Jennifer discovered that Caleb was still afraid. Not in the obvious ways she might have expected. He didn't pull away from her or retreat into coldness. He was tender and attentive, waking her with coffee in bed most mornings, leaving notes in her bag that she'd find while at work, making sure she never questioned whether he wanted her there. But there was a particular kind of anxiety that would surface late at night when he thought she was sleeping. She'd feel him watching her, like he was memorizing the way she looked in the darkness, like he was gathering evidence that she was real. One night she opened her eyes and caught him in the act. "Hi," she said softly, and he jerked slightly, embarrassed at being caught. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said, moving to roll away, but she grabbed his arm and pulled him back to her. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, pressing herself against him in the darkness. He was quiet for a long moment. "That this is too good to be true. That you're going to wake up one day and realize you could do better." Jennifer propped herself up on one elbow, forcing him to look at her even though he clearly didn't want to. "Caleb, we've been through this. I'm not going anywhere." "That's what you say now," he said, and there was something raw in his voice. "But Victoria said she was committed too. And my ex-fiancé believed in us. People change their minds. People leave." "I'm not people," Jennifer said firmly. "I'm me, and I don't leave. I stay. I fight. I show up even when you're being a complete idiot about your abandonment issues." He almost smiled at that. Almost. But the fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface like something alive. "I'm scared," he admitted finally, and it was the most honest thing she'd heard him say in weeks. "I'm terrified that I'm going to screw this up, that I'm going to become the version of myself that pushes you away again, that one day you'll realize you deserve someone who isn't broken." Jennifer kissed him then, slow and deliberate, trying to pour all her certainty into the gesture. "You're not broken, you're healing. There's a difference. And you're not going to lose me because you have bad nights where the fear comes back. You're going to lose me if you give up trying." "I won't give up," he whispered against her mouth. "Then we're fine," she said. "We're more than fine. We're actually going to be okay." The Mercer Enterprises rebrand was becoming the gold standard for corporate transformation. Publications were running features on how the redesigned spaces had fundamentally altered the company culture, how employee satisfaction and retention had skyrocketed, how Caleb's leadership had evolved from aggressive and isolation-focused to collaborative and human-centered. The irony wasn't lost on Jennifer. Victoria's attempt to destroy him had inadvertently created the perfect platform for his redemption. But the professional success didn't isolate them in the way she might have feared. Instead, it created a partnership that extended beyond their personal relationship. They spent afternoons in conference rooms debating design elements alongside strategy. They attended client meetings together, Jennifer presenting her vision while Caleb provided the business rationale. They'd become a unit, professionally and personally, and Jennifer could see how much that healed something in him. The knowledge that she wasn't just there for him, she was there with him. "The Seattle office wants to implement a similar redesign," Caleb mentioned one evening as they cooked dinner together in the penthouse kitchen. He was chopping vegetables while she managed the pasta, their movements coordinated from months of falling into this domestic rhythm. It's a 3-month project and they're requesting you specifically. That's amazing, Jennifer said, genuinely thrilled. When do they need me? Next month, he said, and she caught the hesitation in his voice. It's going to require you to spend about 2 weeks a month up there. I'm fine with it. I know how important your career is, but I wanted to make sure you were okay with the separation. Jennifer stopped stirring and turned to look at him. This was the test, she realized. This was where his fear would really surface. She'd been asking for this, hoping he would trust that her ambition wasn't a reflection of her commitment to him. I'm going to do it, she said carefully. But I want you to know that this doesn't change anything between us. 2 weeks away is 2 weeks away. 2 weeks back is us, together, in this space we've built. I know, he said, and he did seem to know it intellectually, but she could see the fear working in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the cutting board a little too tightly. Hey, she said, moving to him and taking his hands. Look at me. I'm not leaving you. I'm going to work on an exciting project and then I'm coming home to you. That's how this works. That's how it's supposed to work, he said quietly, until it doesn't. Until we make it stop working, Jennifer corrected, and I'm not making it stop. He kissed her then, right there in the kitchen with pasta boiling and vegetables everywhere, and she felt him trying to convince himself that she was telling the truth. She made a silent promise to show him, through every trip, every return, every moment of consistency, that she meant what she said. The Seattle project was exactly as intense as Caleb had warned her it would be. Long days coordinating with the local design team, evening meetings with the Seattle office executives, weekends spent refining concepts and addressing concerns. But it was also exhilarating, watching her vision come to life in a completely different city, knowing that she was leaving her mark on another space, another company, another group of people who would work in environments she'd created. Caleb video called her every night without fail. Some nights they just sat together in comfortable silence, her in her Seattle hotel room, him at their penthouse, existing in the same digital space even though they were separated by 1,000 miles. Some nights they talked about work, about the day, about everything and nothing. And some nights, when the longing got too intense, they would make love through the screen, slow and intentional, reminding each other that distance didn't diminish what they felt. On her last night in Seattle, Jennifer got a call from Diana instead of Caleb. Don't panic, Diana said immediately, but Caleb has had a rough day. He's been in a mood all morning, and I think the separation is finally hitting him. He's worried you're not coming back. Jennifer's heart ached. Of course I'm coming back. I'm on a flight tomorrow morning. I know, Diana said gently, but his brain isn't processing that right now. His brain is in 7 years ago mode, convincing him that people leave. Can you maybe call him? Jennifer did, and found Caleb sitting in the dark in the living room, staring out at the city lights. He looked diminished somehow, smaller, like fear had actually taken physical form. You were going to leave me without saying goodbye, he said, and it wasn't a question. No, I wasn't, Jennifer said firmly, staying calm even though her heart was breaking at how much pain he was in. I land at 9:30 tomorrow morning. I'll be at the penthouse by 11. And then we're not separating for a very long time. How can you be sure? He asked, and his voice was so small, so lost. Because I'm choosing this, Jennifer said. Every single day, I'm choosing you. And tomorrow, I'm going to get on a plane and choose you. And next week, I'm going to do the same thing. And in 10 years, I'm still going to be choosing you. So stop waiting for me to leave, because I'm not. There was silence on the line, and then she heard him crying, not dramatic sobs, but the quiet tears of a man who'd been holding his fear in for so long that finally releasing it felt almost like relief. I love you, he said, his voice rough. I love you too, she said. Now stop being an idiot and get some sleep. Tomorrow we get to wake up together. When she arrived at the penthouse the next morning, Caleb was waiting in the lobby like he couldn't bear to wait even the 30 seconds for her to take the elevator. He pulled her into his arms before she'd even dropped her luggage, holding her like she might disappear. I'm here, she whispered. I'm home. Don't ever leave again, he said into her hair. I have to, she said gently. The project requires... Then I'm coming with you, he interrupted. Next time, I'm coming to Seattle. I'm not letting you out of my sight for 3 weeks at a time again. It's not good for me. Jennifer pulled back enough to look at him. That's not sustainable, Caleb. You have a company to run. And I have a woman I love who I was fully prepared to let destroy me by leaving, he said. So we're going to find another way. We'll hire someone to manage things while I'm gone. We'll do video calls during the day when I'm needed here, but you're not going to another city alone for weeks at a time while I sit here torturing myself. It should have felt controlling, but it didn't because Jennifer understood what he was really saying. I'm not strong enough to do this alone yet. I need you here. I need to be reminded that you're real. Okay, she said. Next month, we both go to Seattle. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful and full of a love so intense it made her chest ache. They made their way upstairs without breaking contact, and Jennifer felt him finally relax when they were in the privacy of their bedroom, when she was beneath him, and there was nothing between them but skin and breath and absolute certainty. This was where he healed, not in therapy or coaching or self-help books, though he was doing all of those things too. He healed in moments of connection, in the consistent presence of someone choosing him, in the tangible proof that love wasn't a trap designed to destroy him. Thank you, he whispered as he moved inside her, for not giving up on me. I'll never give up on you, she promised, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. 1 year later, Jennifer stood in the lobby of Mercer Enterprises and marveled at how far they'd come. The transformation was complete. Every floor reflected her vision, but more importantly, it reflected Caleb's evolution. Warm, welcoming, human. The space that had once been a monument to corporate power had become something far more valuable, a place where people actually wanted to work. She was waiting for him to come down from the executive offices, holding a small velvet box in her jacket pocket. After a year of him being terrified of abandonment, of her being his constant reassurance, she'd decided it was time to flip the script. She was going to propose. When the elevator doors opened and Caleb stepped out, looking every inch the successful CEO in his perfectly tailored suit, her heart did that same little flip it always did. But there was something different about him now. The tension he used to carry was gone, replaced by an ease that suggested he'd finally, truly believed that she wasn't going anywhere. He saw her and smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. He moved toward her with the confidence of a man who knew he was loved, and Jennifer's breath caught at how beautiful he was. Hey, he said, pulling her close and kissing her forehead. What are you doing down here? Weren't you working on the Denver project? I finished the renderings early, she said, which was a lie. She'd taken the afternoon off specifically for this. I wanted to see you. Well, you've got me, he said, his arm settling around her waist. What do you want to do? I want to take you somewhere, she said. Remember the rooftop garden on the 45th floor? The one we haven't fully designed yet? He followed her into the elevator without question, and as they ascended, Jennifer felt her heart racing. She'd spent all night planning this, had coordinated with Diana to make sure the rooftop would be clear, had arranged for rose petals and soft lighting, had written and rewritten her proposal speech 1,000 times. When the elevator doors opened onto the rooftop garden, Caleb froze. The space was transformed. String lights hung between the potted plants, creating a canopy of soft illumination against the darkening sky. Rose petals in cream and soft pink scattered across the ground. A small table with champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries waited in the center of the space, and standing in the middle of it all was a banner that read, "He never smiled until her. Now it's her turn to ask." Jennifer, Caleb said, understanding dawning on his face. What did you... Shut up, she said gently, pulling out the ring box. It was a simple band in white gold, inscribed on the inside with coordinates, the exact location of the Mercer building. Their place. Their story. I've spent this entire year proving to you that I'm not going anywhere, that I choose you. But it's time for you to know that this isn't conditional. This isn't something I'm doing until you get too scared or broken or human. This is forever. She dropped to one knee on the rooftop of the building where their entire love story had unfolded, looking up at a man who'd learned to believe in connection again. Caleb Mercer, will you marry me? For a moment he didn't respond. His eyes glistened with tears, and she was terrified he might say no, might be too afraid of the permanence of marriage, too convinced that forever was impossible. But then he was pulling her up and kissing her with such intensity that she forgot to breathe. "Yes," he said against her mouth. "Yes, absolutely yes. But I'm going to need you to let me also propose, because I've been carrying a ring for 3 months, waiting for the right moment, and I'll be damned if I let you steal my thunder." Jennifer laughed, a sound of pure joy, and he slipped a ring on her finger, a stunning vintage diamond that must have cost him more than she could calculate. "I was going to do it at our 1-year anniversary dinner next month," he continued, holding her hand up to admire both rings together. "But this is better. This is you showing me that you're not afraid of me, that you're not just staying because I'm scared of being left. You're staying because you actually want this. You actually want me." "I've always wanted you," she said simply, "even when you were being an absolute asshole about your walls." He laughed then, a real laugh that came from deep in his chest, and she felt something settle inside her. This was it. This was the man he'd become, still cautious, still working through his trauma, but fundamentally changed by being loved consistently, by having someone refuse to abandon him. They spent the evening on that rooftop, drinking champagne and eating strawberries and talking about their future. Wedding plans, which neither of them had any interest in making immediately. A house, maybe, somewhere with a garden where Jennifer could design landscapes the same way she designed interior spaces. Children someday, though they both agreed they needed more time to just be them first. "I have something I need to tell you," Caleb said as the sun fully set, pulling her against his chest as they sat on one of the cushioned chairs. "I've been seeing a therapist for about 4 months now." Jennifer pulled back to look at him. "Really? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to do it for me, not for you," he said. "I needed to work through my abandonment issues without using you as my emotional support system. You've been incredible, but I realized I was putting too much weight on you to fix me. That's not fair." "What did you discover?" she asked, genuinely interested. "That I'm still terrified," he said honestly. "That Victoria and my ex-fiancé hurt me in ways that don't just disappear because I found someone good. But that terror doesn't have to control me. I can feel scared and still choose to trust you. I can have bad days where the fear comes back and still know that you're not leaving." Jennifer kissed him then, soft and sweet. "I'm really proud of you. I'm really lucky to have you," he said. "And I'm never going to take that for granted." They made love that night under the stars, on the rooftop that would eventually become one of their favorite places. It was slow and deliberate, his hands mapping her body with a familiarity that suggested absolute comfort and trust. He whispered promises against her skin, promises to keep working on himself, to keep choosing her even on days when his fear tried to convince him she was going to leave, to spend the rest of his life proving that he was worth the risk she'd taken on him. 6 months later, they didn't have a big wedding. They had something far more intimate, a ceremony in the rooftop garden with just their closest friends and family. Diana cried. Marcus gave a speech about how Jennifer had changed the trajectory of his career. Caleb's parents, whom Jennifer had gotten to know over the previous months, beamed with pride at their son who'd learned to open his heart again. When the officiant asked if Caleb took Jennifer to be his wife, he didn't hesitate. "Absolutely, for the rest of our lives." When Jennifer repeated her vows, her voice was steady and sure. She promised to stay through fear and doubt and healing. She promised to keep choosing him every single day for as long as they both lived. After the ceremony, Caleb pulled her aside into the executive lounge, the space that had started everything, the first time he'd truly acknowledged that she'd created something beautiful. "I love you," he said, and it was the simplest thing he could say and also the most profound. "I love you, and I can't believe I almost lost you because I was too scared to let you in." "You didn't lose me," Jennifer said, "and you're not going to. We're going to have arguments and bad days and moments where the fear comes back, but we're going to handle it together. That's what marriage is." "That's what love is," he corrected. They spent their wedding night in the penthouse, which had slowly transformed over the past year into a space that reflected both of them. Jennifer's design books on the shelves alongside his business volumes, her plants mixed with his minimalist aesthetic. their lives woven together so completely that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. And when he made love to her as his wife, it was with a tenderness and certainty that suggested he'd finally, truly believed that she wasn't going anywhere, that they were building something that would last. 2 years later, Jennifer stood in the lobby of the newest Mercer Enterprises satellite office in San Francisco, reviewing plans for a complete redesign. Her business had exploded. She now had a team of 12 designers working under her, all trained in her philosophy of creating human-centered corporate spaces. Caleb had become known in business circles for pioneering a new approach to corporate culture that actually valued employee wellness and satisfaction. They'd bought a house with a garden, and Jennifer spent her weekends designing landscapes the way she designed buildings, with intentionality and care and a commitment to creating beauty. Caleb had started mentoring other CEOs about emotional intelligence and leadership, channeling his own healing into helping others. But most importantly, he smiled. Not the corporate smiles of years past, but genuine smiles that reached his eyes and suggested a man who'd found peace with himself and the world. One evening, as they sat on their back porch overlooking the garden they'd created together, Caleb took her hand and placed it on his chest, over his heart. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Jennifer asked, though she had a feeling she knew. "For not letting me give up on myself," he said. "For showing me that love isn't a trap, that vulnerability isn't weakness, that I was worthy of being loved even when I didn't believe it myself." Jennifer squeezed his hand. "Thank you for being brave enough to let me love you." They sat together as the sun set, their hands intertwined, watching the garden they'd built flourish in the golden light. And Jennifer thought about the day he'd first ignored her in the lobby, about the cold distance he'd maintained, about the journey they'd taken to get to this place of peace and acceptance. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. He was worth it. If you believe in the power of consistent love to heal old wounds, in the possibility of transforming someone's deepest fear into their greatest strength, if you believe that the most powerful love stories aren't about perfect people, but about broken people choosing to show up for each other every single day, then you know this is just the beginning of their story. This is the foundation they've built for a lifetime of choosing each other, choosing growth, choosing love over fear. Caleb learned that a smile isn't just about facial muscles. It's about deciding that the world is worth experiencing without walls. Jennifer learned that loving someone who's been hurt doesn't mean accepting their pain as your responsibility. It means showing up with consistency until they believe they're worthy. Together, they built something rare and real and absolutely unbreakable. Thank you for taking this journey with them, for believing in their love story, for understanding that true romance isn't about grand gestures. It's about the quiet moments of choosing each other, the small acts of consistency, the courage it takes to be vulnerable with another human being. If you felt their story in your heart, if you cried when he finally let her in, if you cheered when she proposed on that rooftop, please share this story with someone you love. Drop a comment and tell me which moment touched you most. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story of love, danger, and redemption. And remember, the right person won't make you question their love. They'll show you every single day that you're worth staying for. Because if you believe that love can heal anything, that vulnerability is strength, that showing up is more powerful than running away, then you deserve a love like theirs. A love that's real, imperfect, and absolutely worth fighting for. Thank you for being part of this family. I'll see you in the next story.